Hi class. I came to New York in 1993 from Germany, and I had plans to study painting, and very soon I changed this to graphic design because as a painter I had to set my own assignments and goals, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that yet. As in graphic design, you usually you're presented with a problem to solve, so there's always a point where you can start with, and actually solving it without putting too much of your own ego into it is maybe part of the solution, whereas in painting it's much more about yourself and your work. And I couldn't figure out how I would get paid for my opinion as a painter, but as a graphic designer it kind of made sense to me if I made a product and they would sell more of it because it was nicely designed or it was better advertised, then I should be entitled to some part of that profit. It just somehow it seemed to be easier to think about it and how to survive as a graphic designer. After I graduated, I looked for jobs, and a friend of a friend introduced me to a company that was building websites. At the time, I didn't even have an email address. I don't know if I did, but it's something that I've heard of, but nobody would ever contact you via email at this point. It was just still on TV, phones, landlines, of course, not even mobile. And we had DVD-ROMs that were building, sort of these things I could imagine. But with this website design company, IO360, I was very young, and they would give us accounts to work on the website for Delta Airlines, for Sotheby's, for really big companies, because they had no one else to go to, because people just didn't know what this whole HTML thing was. And it was something that wasn't too hard to pick it up for me, and I could get paid for it, and it was fun, and it was very developing, and it was always new things came out on like a weekly basis, and they still do. So this was the website we did for an auction at Sotheby's for the Sputnik capsule, and this was done. You can see all this text is actually a GIF because you could only use system fonts, but the client in this case really wanted something futuristic, and we had to be very careful with loading times. So all these colors that I use here are what we call back then debabelized to a very small set of maybe 8 or 16 or 32 or 64 and then 256 colors as a GIF. So it goes in 8-bit increments. So we had like a basic baritone, that's a typo. It should be basic HTML. There were no style sheets. Could align left or right or center. There was no PHP that we'll talk about later. The tables a little bit later on where you could align things, but we even often used pixels to stretch things away from the center. If we had to try to align something, we would make a small picture that was clear to push it out. And for Sony we built websites, like this one was for the Epcot Center. And the sketch below you can see is a little crazy that I did, and I showed it to the client, and then we kind of toned it down to what it ended up, the top layout. This is my resume, and you can see I'm freelancing for a lot of different companies over the years. I made a little info chart because I'm a graphic designer. I want to show that off a little bit of the amounts of jobs that I had with different companies, or like highlighting some of the bigger clients over the years. I also lived in Tokyo off and on. You see the red spots there were the times that I stayed in Tokyo. As a digital graphic designer, that was possible because I could always email. But right after college, one thing that I really got into the graphics with was doing flyers for nightclubs, and we had a company called Boys and Girls. The name comes from that people came to our office, aka my apartment, and there were a lot of promoters coming in to make those flyers, and they would always enter and be like, hey, what's up, boys and girls? It was a way for me to get my name out there. On the back of each of those flyers was my name, and back then even home phone number, where people could contact me if they needed more graphics, so I could advertise myself through these graphics too. And one flyer was picked up by Manabu at some point, and he asked me if I could help him work on the MTV website, and for many years I worked on several of their websites. It was always a very good freelance job besides the flyers didn't really pay that much of the bills, but having some kind of commercial works and building on websites was a really good way to get some corporate money into the company. And since we did so many flyers and had all these connections, we started a magazine to bind it all together into, let me just grab a few here. I just happen to have them here. This is the size of it, and you can see in the inside, they're all like little listings of the shows that were going on in New York. These are some of the covers. They're always bootlegs. What kind of killed it again was the internet, because people were advertising through email and websites instead of print anymore, and we stopped this about 2003, 4, 5, I forgot. But these were some of the websites that I did on the site: energy companies, photographers, real estate, record companies quite a lot, because through the magazine, of course, we had a lot of contacts to them. Then I also did a lot of DVDs and Blu-rays, which at the time was also a new thing. Still around in a very minimal way, but you'll still be asked to design buttons for games, for kiosks, for any kind of interactive platform. And who knows what's going to be the next platform like that. So here are some more websites for fashion. In Japan I did these were kind of consultant companies. And I worked a long time at Scholastic building their new website. These are some of the websites I'm working on these days. Clients that are ongoing, that always need updates. I also go critique my work at a group called Type Thursday. We used to meet at the Type Directors Club, but you might have heard they kind of closed that club through Corona and allegations of being not inclusive enough to BIPOC. I think it's an ongoing problem in our whole in this whole industry that not everyone is represented equally. So it's kind of up to us to change that and to write the history of tomorrow. But this is the website. It expanded to a bunch of cities around the world now, so we can meet over Zoom meetings. We do this all the time, have coffee with people in Madrid, in Bogota, in Bucharest I had someone now. So that's been really interesting to have this group. But I'm excited about this web design class, and we'll talk about a lot of stuff. I'd like to have a lot of discussion because things are changing quickly, and I'm not always, like, I can't keep up with everything. So if I hear from classes, it always helps me also if people bring up new things that they saw and links that they were intrigued by. So let's post a lot of stuff. It will help everybody. Okay, great. I'll see you around.